welcome to another episode of the Wavemakers Podcast, where we learn more about the people in maritime industry and who are they as leaders of this change behind the role that they do. So my today's guest is Susana Germino, Chief Sustainability and Energy Transition Officer at Swire Shipping.
And Swire Bulk.
And Swire Bulk.
Yes.
But who is really Susana? How would you describe yourself?
Well, it's quite an interesting conversation. I don't think that a lot of people feel very comfortable of talking about themselves, especially when you're so used to talk about something else. But I think that I am loud. I am passionate. I am definitely Latin. I am, my mom would say stubborn. I call it determined. And I am incredibly curious about life in general. And I love traveling. And it's one of the things that I absolutely adore doing is traveling. I don't think that I have always a very easy temper. And I think it comes from the Latin temper. But it's, I think the best way to describe myself is really I'm a proper Latin person. I talk with my hands, I smile when I talk, and I bring all of that Latin energy wherever I go.
And I think that is quite also important in this industry. And I think in this industry as well, people are quite expressive and it's so beautiful. There's so much diversity to it. And if you were a vessel, which type of a vessel would you be and why?
Well, I would be an ultra-large crude carrier. And, when I studied naval engineering back in Portugal, where I was from, and I remember that all of my colleagues, when we were studying, they all wanted to design ships or sailing boats. And I never really understood why, because what I was always fascinated was by, large vessels and large size vessels that you feel like a little ant next to. And I remember the first time that I saw in one of the shipyards in Portugal, it was not an ultra-large crude carrier, it was more of a Suezmax, I think. And I was just absolutely surprised with the size of it, even though I had seen it and designed it and looked at it in university. When you look at it the first time and you understand how large the vessels are, it made me feel very small. So I think that the largest vessels around are, containers are interesting, but ultra-large crude carriers is what I would be. They are unstoppable, because you have to stop hours before you get to port in order to stop the inertia. There's not a lot that you can do to, physically stop them. And, and if there's a problem with them, it is quite a disaster. So I think that describes me very well. I think that I am very easygoing unless I am upset, and then it could be a disaster, part of the Latin temper too.
Where did that, let's say, interest for this industry come from?
So it came from my family, actually. All of my family, has had or has some sort of connection to shipping. My great-grandfather was the pilot in the Royal Yacht for the Portuguese royal family, many, 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 many years ago, over 100 years ago. And I think that the whole connection. So, my great-grandfather, my grandfather worked in the industry, my father worked in the industry, but more as suppliers of things to ships. And they still do, actually. My sister that studied hospitality, she worked in cruise vessels for a few years. And my cousin is in the Portuguese Navy. He's a submariner in the Portuguese Navy. So I think that all of my family has always been connected. And I always wanted to study engineering since I was about 6 years old, because my mom told me that I saw a picture of my university on TV. There was, and I asked my mom, what is that? And my mom told me that's the university where really clever boys go. And I said, well, just clever boys, not clever girls. And my mom looked at me and I said, I'm going there. So since I was 6 that I wanted to be an engineer, because I wanted to go to that university, because someone told me that was university just for boys. And when I was looking at the degrees that they had, I saw naval engineering, and I thought, well, this is perfect because it joins physics, that is what I really, really liked to study when I was in school, and the sea. That was my big passion. So, sailing, diving, everything that is sea related, I love doing.
And were you one of the few ladies when you joined?
I am number 9 of women engineers, naval engineers in Portugal. So there was 8 behind me, yes.
Wow.
So, yes, still in the top 10. And yes, it was in the year that I joined, there was about 4 of us. We're all scattered all around the world. Not a lot of them living in Portugal, and actually 2 of them living in Norway. And yes, but I am the only one that has moved more from the technical part into something else. The others are still a little bit more focused in the technical aspects and in the part of engineering.
Mm-hmm. And when you were navigating your career, was it like, did you know where you wanted to navigate it towards, or is it something that you spontaneously chose out of some intuition?
Well, I don't know if it was intuition or if it was just, the universe conspiring in a good way for me. Every time that I had, especially in my early years of my career, I really feel always the need to give myself a target. So whenever I start a new job, I always think, what do I want to achieve and where do I want to go next? Because you have to work towards something. And I remember in my first job, I was working in a Portuguese shipyard for a third party, for an owner. Actually, my first project was oil and gas. And I remembered at that time that I thought that, it should be really cool to work for class because, you have class and they're having a look at everything that the shipyard is doing. So I worked first for that American company, then I worked in the Portuguese shipyard, then I moved to another yard. And when I was in the other yard, I got an invitation to work for class. So, I thought that it was going to take me 10 years, and it actually took me about 2.5 to get to that position. Then when I started with class, I thought about technical management, and then I got that job. And then when I was in technical management, I wondered how commercial management was, and I got that job. So every time that things have been happening quite naturally in a way. And it has been a surprising journey just because I think I have I'm very grateful that I see shipping from a different lens than a lot of people, because I've had so many different jobs in so many different areas. The picture of shipping for me is quite whole, because it goes from, class and technical management to, the design of the vessels too, because, I did work in shipyards and that's what we did, and, but then, chartering and operations in bulk and, management of vessels in difficult geographies. And now, ended up in sustainability and energy transition, that it was not an area that I thought I was going to end up at all. Yes, it makes sense in a way, actually, because I think to understand, especially the challenges in energy transition, you need to have that technical background to understand the detail or the complication, or how complex the case is. But if you don't have the commercial experience too, you will not be able to see how do you use some of those solutions into practical ways that can be adopted. Because, I always think that technical people think the world goes around their belly button, and commercial people think the world goes around their belly button, and actually they are two sides of the same coin. You need both. There's not one that can drive any change. You need both to move at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that level of exposure also allows you to communicate well to the stakeholders and to create this strategic and business cases around the technologies. And that is that full circle that comes together, and how beautiful that is to have when you're also, let's say, helping companies set themselves up for the new type of future. I think with new energy infrastructure being set up and all these new technologies, maybe not yet fully shaping the way we work and the way Maritime goes, but towards that.
Yes, totally agree. Totally agree.
And how would you describe maybe the culture of the industry did it change or maybe not?
I think that this, if I look at the last 30 years, I've been working in shipping for more than 30 years. I've never worked in any other industry, so I don't have a point of reference of how is the culture in other industries, because this is all I know. But I do think that there is a different culture in every part of shipping that we work, and you can see it even when you go, for example, to conferences, because conferences are intended not for the general shipping. Usually they're intended for pockets within shipping. So I see the technical side of shipping, a little bit conservative, but it has not really changed that much. You can see some of the changes now. For example, I think that one of the great changes for the technical side and the crews especially is having Wi-Fi on board. The whole thing of you are isolated and you have no way to contact your family or your friends or to have any exposure outside. It has stopped, and I think that is quite a revolution. And I do expect in the next 2-3 years that some of the digitalization some of the digitalization solutions will start being viable, because it's just so much easier to have Wi-Fi. So the technical, a little bit old-fashioned, very close to women, for example. There's not a lot of women in technical still. Then you have the part of, the chartering part and the trading side of it is, very vibrant, and I think that it could be the same trading culture in any industry. It is fast. It is, people tend to be much more open and much more sensitive to what is happening all around the world, yeah? And so, and then within each segment, you also have then these little pockets, and people tend to group together. You don't see a lot of technical people moving, getting with commercial people. They tend to, operate more on their own little pockets. I find it quite interesting too.
Yes, I have experienced some of that previously also, and actually for the projects where we did bring them together, that was really successful, and it was very nice to observe that change also from people maybe being uncomfortable not to be in their groups, and then somehow finding new bonds, let's say. But I have experienced that dynamic, and I do think that also with the uptake of digitalization, the new technologies, and that are challenging how we think and forcing us, let's say, to look at things from all the angles together, that is maybe influencing the change. And what I've noticed is people in this industry are very passionate about their things in their own ways. Like,
I agree, but I don't know, again, is there other industries, are people not as passionate? I've told you before that my sister works for hospitality, my brother works in the automotive industry. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I see my sister passionate about what she does, but about the industry, I think that there is a general sense of, I find it fascinating. I find it that there is something for all of us here, and you can be... you can be an introvert, you can be an extrovert, you can be, detailed, focused, or generalist, and there will be a job for you. And this is one of the things I always find fascinating when we're looking at, for example, attracting talent to come into the industry. I always think, why would no one be interested? It's a global industry. It impacts, we move the world, 90% of everything that is around us, it comes on a ship. It is absolutely essential. Just because it is not in the front of newspapers unless there is a disaster, it doesn't mean that it is absolutely essential for global economies, and is a lot of the times almost like the glue that puts everything together. And in some of the geographies where Swire shipping operates, for example, in the Pacific Islands, it provides for a lot of communities a lifeline that, if we are late with our ships, we could run out of food in the shops, and it brings you like a part of social responsibility too, that you are contributing for communities to better themselves and to continue surviving.
Yeah, and I think during COVID and after COVID, like during COVID, we did get a bit of that experience, what it is like for seafarers being in a confined environment. for a while, right? And we only got a snippet of it, and they keep going through it over and over again. And on the other side, also this dependency of the supply chains that I think people became aware of the importance of this industry only then. But this is, as you said, for islands, a very common, let's say, worry, fear to have, because they are somewhat away and only depending on the ships coming over.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at your recent journey, you have recently, as you said, moved more towards sustainability, energy transition. Why?
So I've been with the Swire group now for 12 years, and this is my fourth role and third location. So I started managing the coastal business in steamship shipping. That is a company of the Swire group in Papua New Guinea. That was fascinating experience. And then I moved to Singapore and worked in bulk logistics and projects. And then I moved to Indonesia, and I was in a minority shareholding, and I was the CEO of a public listed company. And the majority shareholder was the third biggest coal company in Indonesia. Fantastic company. It was really a pleasure to work for them. So I was, let's say, seconded from Swire to this company called MBSS. So during COVID, I was in Indonesia, and we were doing domestic coal. So this is what we transported, domestic coal, backwards and forwards. COVID, I think that COVID has marked us all, and I do have to say, I feel very, very grateful that I was living in a very large house with a very large garden. If I had been living in Singapore, it would have not had been as pleasant. We had other concerns like, the health concerns in Indonesia. But during the period that we were there, we started to see the impact that ESG and ESG bonds mainly had on the future. And I remember thinking, going through the majority shareholders at that time, we used to have directors meetings every year. And there was one year that the theme was ESG. And we were talking about financing and how we were seeing the investment involvement, the evolution of investment going forward. And I thought, this whole sustainability thing, and I've never been a big supporter of nature projects, but always been very practical. And I thought, this is going to be no longer a nice to have. This is going to start having, it's a license to operate. If you don't get it right, you are, you could damage the company's future because you just will not have access to finance, or you will end up with having a bad reputation. So at a certain point, the Indonesian company decided to sell that particular venture. And, Swire asked me, would you like to come back? And this role was about to become free because my predecessor was about to retire. And I just thought, I need to clean my coal karma. It felt a little bit different, carrying all of this coal around. And I really thought this is the future. And at that time, I had started looking at decarbonization a bit on, what are the solutions, what is going to happen, a little bit on environmental compliance, very, very little. And once I started looking into the subject more closely, I found it fascinating to see I think a lot of the people that talk about decarbonization are just scratching the surface, and the issues that we see ourselves as an industry, they are really much bigger than that. And I just find it fascinating and evolving. And I feel sometimes I'm a bit bipolar because I change my mind quite often because, I think that this is an opportunity, and you continue down that path to see if it is really an opportunity. And then you realize that you have, 2 or 3 other potential solutions coming from there. And, today you say A and tomorrow you say B. Actually, I say a lot to our shareholders and to both MDs that I feel that I'm not very consistent sometimes with my message, but I say there's no blueprint. We are discovering as we go. So we have to be agile enough to say, okay, we thought this was the right way, but you know what? We are here now, and I tell you, this is not the right way. We might have to go some other way. So I really enjoy it. It's very, it never stops. I never stop learning.
I think it is a little bit similar to a startup journey just because there's no blueprint. So we are creating it from scratch to something. And then it is like, okay, take a step, okay, reevaluate, pivot if you need to. And again, because this industry is also constantly moving, I guess the changes in that direction are reflected there as well. So, I mean, I've been in sustainability for a while, but not so while in maritime, and it is the same. Like things keep evolving, and we keep learning new things. And now that you work with your teams, how I guess how do they feel about working with you on this topic?
I think that I have the easiest purpose-driven job. It is. We were talking about talent after Singapore Maritime Week last week. We were talking about recruitment and talent, and one of the things that it's an emerging trend, is how the younger generation really looks for a purpose. They are asking in interviews, what do you do about sustainability? What do you do about energy transition? I think that I have never come across someone that is not interested in a part of it. In the younger generation, and then you have all of the spectrum within an organization. But I think that I have two very separate groups of people working in my team. One very sustainability related, so they are amazing. I mean, they're an inspiration even for me. That has been, this is a total new area, and I learn with my team every day. And then I have the more engineering focus, the fleet efficiency, the voyage and vessel performance, the research on fuels and the energy transition, energy efficiency technologies and adoption, that they're very much like me. They are curious and they want to learn more, and they're all driven, and actually adding the sustainability add to it. I think that they feel quite happy that they are part of the future, because all of them necessary to enter into energy transition, and very important in the next 2 decades.
And how do they interact when they come together? And
we all sit together and we sit fine. I think that they are curious. I think that both have, the sustainability team is curious about what the energy transition team does, and the energy transition team is very curious about sustainability too. So every now and then I hear some more of the hardcore engineers interested with some of our more purpose-driven projects or community support. I think it is really nice. All very big gender equality and diversity supporters, all.
And when these young talents join, what is your advice to them in terms of navigating their careers in this space?
I think that whatever you do, you have to love it, because life is so short. If you don't like what you do, you should really find something else to do. There is something for everyone in shipping. There is areas that are highly technologic that are looking at advances in AI and machine learning and data, and we are so behind compared to other industries that there's so much opportunity there for improvement and for new technologies. And then there's trading and selling that is exciting. It is not different. There's part of brokers that is very exciting too. There's so much happening, and I do think that over the next 2 decades we will see more of a revolution in shipping that we have ever seen before. I think that we will, the latest big revolution was probably when we went from steamboats to diesel engines, and this is going to be the next, and is not just driven by the energy transition, but by access to data too, and the ability to collect data in digitalization. So it's going to be a very exciting. I sometimes wish I had been born like 10 years later, so I could see the whole revolution, because I think that I will stop working before we get to, definitely before we get to 2050. definitely before 2040. So let's see if I get to 2030 or not.
But I'm sure you will be in touch with the industry even
Yes.
at that point. You will get to experience it or hear about it or see the impact of now
Yes.
decisions
Yeah.
from that world. But I also noticed that somehow the access to data is unlocking decision making faster. And again, with everything that is happening on the energy transition side, I feel that the industry is moving so fast, although for many it's portrayed as very slow, traditional. But I think the people who are not in it don't realize how fast things are happening.
Definitely, when I was living in Indonesia, the type of vessels and segment of vessels was very different from what Swire Shipping and Swire Bulk have, because they were much smaller tonnage. And I remember looking at some of the technology we had and thinking that we were 10 years behind. And what I see is that it is very easy you have to actively want to make sure that you are ahead. So you have to inform yourself. You have to study. It's not an area that that things will come to you. You really need to be curious and see what technologies are out there. What could you do with data? And it's very, I mean, the Wi-Fi for me really is that point, is telling to crews that no longer, it was not that long ago, it was 10 years ago that you didn't even you had email, and it was just a couple of people that could send email, and now, I sailed with one of our vessels recently from Port Klang to Singapore, because we were celebrating that we were doing a pilot that we had 9, called All Aboard Alliance. We had 9 women seafarers on board on that ship, and we were launching that pilot. And I was having meetings in teams as if I was in the office. And I was actually joking with all of my colleagues, maybe we should, we have work from home, work from ship, work from the office, because it was perfect. There was absolutely no problems with Starlink. It's fantastic.
I think that is a good idea. And I think sometimes new joiners, they miss that experience of being on the ship, and even size-wise, but even getting that experience and connection with the people on board. And what is, let's say, a great day for you when you come back from work? You think this was such a good day. How does that look like?
I think that every time that I feel that I have helped, I'm very, first I have to say, I am very lucky that we have amazing shareholders that support sustainability and energy transition. I do not have to, I'm asked to drive, but they ask for it to be driven, as in, so it is not I don't have to, it's not a push-pull, we're all walking towards the same path, or walking the same direction. But every time that I have the boards approving something that I know it will make a little change in the world for the better, it's the happiest day. And it could be with the biggest project of, looking at dual fuel technology and what fuel we choose next, or, having a project approved, or a client supporting the adoption of greener fuels, adoption of new technology in our ships, or approving, some of the research funds that we have to look into new technology. But also, I have to say, the happiest moment I had in the last couple of weeks was when I was in one of our vessels, and we have this program in the Philippines for both companies that allows our seafarers to go and do volunteering work with Endangered Species International. So they support the communities, they, clean garbage, they, plant mangroves, support the turtles. So there's a lot of activities. And there was one of the crew members that told me that he had been in that project, and he spent 10 minutes telling me how amazing it was, and how fantastic, and how everyone got so inspired, and how everyone liked to work for Swire, because we didn't look just at we looked at the whole part of the support of the community and the welfare of the employees. And I was so happy. I was so happy. So every time that I see that one of the actions of that we do as a company has improved someone's life or has brought them some joy, that is really what makes my day much better.
And it's so great to be in that position also to influence that and expand that reach. And I know you like diving.
Crazy.
Now that you mentioned Philippines, I'm sure the next time you go diving there, it's also special.
Yes, and I mean, I'm a very big diver. I actually, about 12 years ago, I decided, I left my job when I was in Bangkok at that time, and I decided to be a dive master. So I call it my midlife crisis. It was I think that we are allowed more than one midlife crisis, right? So my first midlife crisis, I spent 9 months living in Thailand and working as a dive master. And I loved it, but I also understood that I had this total idea that if life went very wrong, that's what I wanted to do. And I actually realized after working that, no, that's not what I want to do. I love diving as a not as a job, because like everything, the moment that you start doing something as a job, you might love it, but there will be days that you will be tired. And actually what I saw was the person that I am, I like planning, I like organizing. I was starting to see that it was a high potential for me to stop diving and start being in the office organizing everyone. And I thought, no, if I'm going to be in the office, I'm going to be going to do something else that I actually studied for. But I love diving, and most of my holidays are diving related. And I think I know most places better underwater than above it. That gives me an extra, that is truly my passion. It's, diving, the sea, and all of the biodiversity under, especially sharks. I'm a big fan of sharks. That's my favorite shark, is our sharks. Yeah.
Oh, I've seen it in one of my own diving trips. I don't do as much, but sometimes. And it's really like it puts you in this moment of awe. And I was not, I was scared. Like, of course, I was following instructions, but it was also just looking at this being, and it was just so magnificent, and it didn't care about us actually.
No,
It looked at us and continued.
they're very shy. Yeah. The other amazing in sea experiences was, I think it was probably about 10 years ago, and that was not diving. That was snorkeling. We spent about a week following humpback whales in Tonga. So we had this fantastic photographer, professional photographer that also knows a lot about whales, and he was telling us, how to behave with the whales when they are with the calves. And so we spent a week, and I've had, a baby whale calf that is obviously 300 kilos, about an arm's length from me. And when I grew up, humpback whales were almost extinct. And for me, the first time that I saw a humpback whale swimming under me and I realized my size next to them, I am not very given to tears, but it really, really, I never thought that was going to happen. It's probably one of the happiest moments of my life. It was to see, and they're mammals, you can see warmth in their eyes. They're fantastic. It's fascinating, really. I'm a big fan of whales too, but sharks is my favorite.
No, I really also enjoy that. And I somehow feel that even these small fish, like I love to observe their interactions and how they move and organize themselves. And it's really wonderful to see that. And it's wonderful that we're moving to creating, hopefully, a world richer with it. And when now going back to your adventure of moving around the world, how was that like? How did you enjoy shifting through different cultures as well?
It's a privilege. It's been probably, one of the things that has made me happiest, because I've always understood I was very nomadic. I don't really like being in the same place for very long. And working in an industry that has allowed me to work in, I think, 8 or 9 countries in the last 20 something years has been really, really special. Every country that I've lived has taught me something more about myself, something more about human nature. And actually, when you look at human nature and cultural input, people are the same everywhere. It doesn't matter where country in the world, what continent you are. Human nature is the same everywhere. Cultural inputs do mark people and how they react to others. But you have to be, but good people are good people everywhere. Clever people are clever people everywhere. We're always all the same. So it has taught me so much about tolerance and equality. It's been really a privilege. I can't imagine. I'm so happy that this happened, because I remember being about 14 and all of my friends, my teenage friends at that time, they all wanted to, get married, have children, and I never wanted either. Because I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to, work from everywhere. And that's exactly what I have done. I did marry. I have no children, but I have 2 dogs. But it's not everyone that can say the 2 things that I said when I was little, that I was going to be an engineer going to that university and I was going to spend my life traveling around the world, and they happened exactly as I expected, or even better, actually. It's really good. I'm a very happy person.
That's wonderful to hear. And I think it's always that when we are in that seat, we don't really know where we're going, but then when we look backwards, it kind of makes sense. And yes, I can also relate to some of that. Also, when I was young, I was like, my savings will be in my passport. And somehow, I guess we do choose things that resonate with us.
Correct.
And do you maybe have any questions for me?
Yes, I'm very curious of how you ended up in this situation and what are your plans for the future.
In this situation with the
how you left your corporate job and you're now in a new challenge. What drove you to this?
Yeah, so I think I always had entrepreneurial aspirations since I was a kid. Actually, I was always somehow organizing people around me and doing small scales of businesses, like either it's chewing gums or like putting together bracelets and selling them in the street. And then initially I wanted like to pursue academic pathway, and that eventually brought me to Singapore, where I did my PhD. And as I was going through it, I really wanted to make an impact with what I was doing, and I was kind of impatient to wait that someone finds my paper and decides that they would put it into the world. And that's where I initially had my first startup that was upcycling materials to create carbon materials for energy storage. But that was the first time, and I had no clue what I was doing either. I was a part of this accelerator, and they were talking about VCs, and I was like Googling, what does this even mean? So, I mean, I didn't know that was me, but I enjoyed the process of it. I really enjoyed building it. So when that failed, I joined the Digital Innovation Agency, where I was seconded to Microsoft. I was creating and driving innovation programs for them. And that was quite successful. They scaled programs across Southeast Asia, Middle East. And then Maersk set their decarbonization team, and they asked me to join. And I never thought about shipping as my industry, because I was always driving sustainability. And actually, my friend who had a startup in this maritime space, when he asked me to join before that, I was like, listen, I don't think like my passion is sustainability. I don't think I would do justice. Like, you need to hire your first employees and they need to be super passionate about it. And then I did end up joining Maersk because I just thought of this scale of impact that I could have, driving innovation and considering the like 3% of global emissions, and that was super interesting. And then the whole new world opened to me. When I joined, I was like, this is a whole universe, and there's so many problems to solve. And I think as I was working with technical teams, and it's just this entrepreneur in me just started calling stronger and stronger. And I enjoyed working with the people that I did work with, but it came to this point where I was like falling sick if I was not thinking of this idea that I had in mind. And there was just this calling with me when I also talked with Max, and when we matched our visions for our life, I was like, okay, this is this moment where you just need to do it. And I think I would, in retrospective, if I didn't do it, I would always wonder what if. And this way I just like, okay, let me try to drive change from a different seat. And at least I know that I'm fully aligned with myself, and it will take me somewhere. There were good things happening before. So now I'm here. And it's really interesting also learning about the industry from different perspectives and different people, and sometimes trying to like empathize with the smaller ship owners, with different stakeholders in the industry, how they see the challenge. So this is a new learning for me as well, not to look at it from a pure corporate angle. And here we are. And what I love about it is that I get to wear different hats every day. And one day maybe I feel more like a chief marketing officer. The next day I am chief strategy officer. And sometimes I'm just trying to learn what to do with administration. But I really enjoy the process, and it's so diverse, and I get to connect with people, and I think that is what I love the most.
Well, I wish you all the luck, because you're obviously a very happy person now. So whatever you're doing, it's working well. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I try to learn about myself too, and also through this series, the more I speak to people, they also teach me more about myself, and also understanding how everyone else experiences this industry teaches me also how where is kind of my space in it as well, and not just as a startup but also me personally. And I really enjoy it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It has been really a pleasure to have a chat with you today.
Thank you. And maybe we will also meet in some point in
I'm
the
sure.
future series. And
shipping is an oyster, a very, very small oyster. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.